We have already circulated their CV and also the post, and Mr. Surajit and also Mr. Rubinder, professors and very eminent personalities. And I will leave the introduction to our Secretary, Mr. Prakash, to introduce them. But at the moment, I just wanted to make a small comment before I give the mic. This is actually a very timely. We choose the event to be at the time when the United States and India have reached to some sort of an agreement. I know the detail is yet to be open, or the devil hiding between the pots, the dots and the knots, as they say, between the lines. But however, we wanted to know from the eminent personalities what could be the what really behind the sudden reaching to this deal. A, B, is it weaponization of trade become a weapon that the United States is using to achieve some mileage on top of any other countries, whether they're having the stick and the carrots, but now they have the stick, they don't have the carrot. Announce that he reached a deal with India, so everybody will presume that it is in his favor. So I will leave it to the eminent personality to highlight to us what could be the sort of deal. And Mr. Prakash, could you please introduce our guests? Thank you.
Thank you and welcome you all. So let me introduce, to begin with, Dr. Sachdev. He's a globally recognized expert on geopolitics and American culture, a prominent media personality. His insights have been introduced, featured in over 10,000 broadcasts and publications across the past 25 years, including the CNN, CNBC, BBC, Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and the Washington Post. He has served as adjunct faculty at American University in Washington, D.C., advised and reported to one of our Indian prime ministers. His work in international relations is featured in case studies and PhD research at leading universities. He is co-founder of USINPAC, rated as one of a research paper in the Journal of the American Political Science Association profiled him as one of influential Indian Americans in America in the last 90 years. His recent book on President Donald Trump, titled Trump Utopia, a guidebook to report Donald Trump. I'm quite sure this is very interesting, must have been reported of America with tips for world leaders and CEO to tackle term utopia. I think this term is also very interesting. It's considered a classic in the field of intelligence. In 2024, Dr. Sachdev was awarded the prestigious Kim Sejong the Great Ali to international relations and global public diplomacy. So, thank you very much for coming here. And Professor Surjit is a professor at the Center of Economic Studies and Planning, Jawaharlal Nehru University, my university. I passed out from there since 2014. Before joining, he served on the faculty at Ambedkar University from 2011 to 2014, and then at Institute for Studies in Industrial Development, New Delhi from 2007 to 2011, and Hindu College University from 1993 to 2007. He has been invited and served as a visiting scholar at the University of, I don't know how to pronounce it, Wroclaw, under Erasmus Mundus European MA Global Studies Program, European Union, and visiting faculty at Birzeit University, Palestine. Professor Majumdar has taught a wide range of courses over his career, covering economic theory, political economy, economic history, and development. He has also been engaged in issues of education and education policy. His academic research has focused on the political economy of India and development, with special focus on the corporate sector, industrialization, and on globalization and its impact on the Indian economy. This has resulted in two monographs, almost two papers he has published in reputed journals, or are chapters in books brought out by India Indian and international publications. So welcome to Professor. Thank you very much, Dr. Paul.
Took a little longer. I didn't even manage 15 kilometers an hour average speed in the travel from my university. Apologies for that. Thank you to the Dr. Awad and to the Foreign Correspondents Club for this invitation to come and share some thoughts and interact with all of you on what is considered to be a very important or landmark event in India's history. So let me, so of course, as we mentioned, the details about the deal are not yet very little really known. But what can be said is that if you look at India's position with the US, there are two reference points that one can use to compare what's likely to be the position now. One is the position before the Trump tariff war began, and the other is the position that was immediately there before the deal. So it's clear that there might be some reduction in terms of what duties will be charged on exports. Some tariffs are coming down, but certainly the general tariffs that were imposed by the Trump administration at the beginning, the tariffs imposed on steel, aluminum, etc., which are on the under Section 232 of their Trade Act, those will remain in place. Okay. Whereas India will obviously be giving some concessions relative to its position before the tariff war began. India did not really retaliate like others, so it wasn't. So in that sense, it's clear that on balance, compared to the position that was there before the Trump administration began, India to give up more. It's only in relation to immediate context before the deal that you could say that there was some possibility of improvement, but we do not know all the details as yet. Now, let me, in terms of the background to this deal, I think there are certain long-term factors which are behind the setting in which this deal is taking place. And there is, of course, an immediate context that has been created by the Trump administration. And the India-US deal is not the only one India has struck in recent times. In particular, it has had an FTA with the EU. Again, all the details of that are also not yet known. It's not yet been signed. It has had an agreement with the UK. Okay. So in the recent past, these are important, significant agreements India has made. Okay. But a few years ago, India chose to opt out of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which was focused on Asia. So there is certain background to these kind of decisions, which I'd like to kind of highlight with reference to what's happened in the, let's say, roughly the 30 years preceding this particular deal. So in these 30 years, the first thing that has happened is, of course, there's been a dramatic shift in the world economy. There's been a dramatic shift in the geography of world production. On one side, the so-called advanced economies, which were very integrated even before globalization amongst each other, which were also close political allies, okay, their share in world production has come down, and particularly sharply in the case of manufacturing activities, while there has been a shift towards Asia in particular. So that's the broad shift that has happened. But with both sides of that divide, there are unevennesses or differences between what has happened. So if you look at the advanced economies decline in world GDP is primarily on account of what has happened to Europe and Japan's share. The US has still managed to retain its relative position within the world economy, though its share in manufacturing has declined, but overall world GDP, it has not actually declined. So within those countries, the US lead over the other players, which in any case was significant in other terms, military, political terms. But even in economic terms, the US lead has been, in some sense, reinforced. So there's been unevenness on that side. On the other side, of course, when you talk about a shift towards the developing countries, it is so dominated by China and East Asia, the East Asian region in general. Okay, India has participated in that process, but not in the same way as China, and not, of course, to the same extent. And these differences are, I think, important in understanding what the position as far as India is concerned has emerged. So this shift that has taken place, of course, has had implications for the global balance of forces also. And we have seen successive US administrations increasingly now being concerned about this shift and responding to it with various measures as an attempt to try and reinforce the conditions of their dominant position within the world, which 30 years ago looked to be absolutely secure at the end of the Cold War. But this shift has altered the balance, even for large number of developing countries in Latin America and Africa, which are exporters of primary commodities or oil or these things. Conditions have changed because the geography of world production has changed, so the market has also changed. So they have also acquired a kind of leverage within the world system. So the rise of China, in a sense, had effects that go beyond China in terms of the world global context. So there have been repeated attempts by the US administration to leverage its still continuing strength to try and kind of arrest this process of shift within the world that is taking place. And economic measures have been part of that. There are differences between different administrations in terms of the specific economic instruments that have been used for that process. So the US has the dominant position in the world international financial system. It's still a dollar-based system. So there are mechanisms that can be used from there. Sanctions have been used against different countries by the US for that purpose. Trump began his second administration by specifically using the leverage of the fact that the US market is an important market for everyone. Now, if one looks at the Indian situation within this process, what has happened is that while this geography of world production has shifted, so has the pattern of India's trade. And India has ended up in a peculiar position of being the third pole in a triangle. So if you look at India's trade now, unlike what it was 30 years ago, India's trade deficit, we have always had a deficit in oil trade because we have to import oil. We have no option as far as that is concerned. But if you look at the non-oil trade, India's trade deficits have largely migrated from the OECD economies to East Asia. China is, of course, the biggest, but China is not the only one. You look at the entire Southeast Asian region, virtually every country in India has a trade deficit. Okay. So India's deficits have become much larger in goods trade compared to earlier, and they have shifted, the sources shifted to East Asia. That's because India's positioning within the global value chains has ended up being rather import intensive. So domestic production is import dependent, but the production that is happening here, not a significant part of it goes into exports to anywhere in the world. But the exports that do happen, and this deficit in India's trade with East Asia is being offset to a large extent by surplus earnings vis-a-vis the OECD economies. The main source, biggest source is the United States. So India has a surplus in goods trade with the US. But India's trade itself has a peculiar feature, which is a very large part of India's exports are services. Now almost touching half of Indian exports is services, not goods. So, and IT services are the main source of that. 55% of those exports of IT services go to the US, another 15% to the UK, and so on. And the US has also become over time the largest source of remittances to India. Remittances from Indians abroad, 27% as per the last survey of the RBI, come from the United States. So India's kind of external balances have become such that on the goods side, you have this large deficit with East Asia. On the other side, you have goods trade surplus with the US, you have a services surplus with the US, and you are also, of course, in the net receiving remittances from the US. So the extra foreign currency earnings which are offsetting the deficit with East Asia are largely coming from the US. US is the most important, but it's also true of the EU. India's trade with the EU, particularly if you leave aside somewhat the more industrial economies like Germany. Okay. So Germany and Japan, we have a deficit, which are the more industrial of the advanced economies. But with the US, we've had and continue to have a significant surplus. So the sources by which you are offsetting what is a deficit are coming from and US is the most important source of that. So that puts India into a strange dilemma. Okay. So in a sense, this pattern of the way India has got inserted into the global economy has reinforced what was in any case a context that was emerging, which is that India was being left with two options, which is that India either becomes a junior partner of the US, okay, in a process of maintaining the US position, okay, and there are, because of India's historical problems with China and all of that, that was always something that was a possibility, okay. And the other was that India leans towards the East rather than the West, okay, and finds a way of becoming a partner in a process of a more balanced kind of world order. But India's kind of nature of insertion into the global economy has, in a sense, exacerbated this dilemma. Now, the problem for India and all these other countries is that part of this, so all of them with whom India is signing deals now, all of them have this problem with East Asia, in their trade with East Asia. Okay. But India is not dependent on them for an export surplus. It's not like China's position. So, and India is not a primarily export-oriented economy either, but it is dependent on them for the extra foreign currency earnings to offset its very large deficits with East Asia. Now, all these countries, including India, face the common problem that the result of these trades in trade, or which is exacerbating a process where they are all deindustrializing, including India, which didn't industrialize that significantly. So this is the larger context that existed. And once the Trump administration starts using this trade, the access to the US market, as a means of, as the leverage to make others apply, India faces a problem which is also somewhat unique. Okay, somewhat unique because it has to, so it has to depend on this thing. So because of this condition, okay, because of this condition, India was actually perhaps bargaining from not a position of strength. Okay, it wasn't a position of strength for India. Okay, because now there is a problem of an immediate problem that you have to make concessions in order to protect whatever you have. Okay, instead of losing everything, you try and protect something, you have to make certain concessions. But if you are ending up in a position where in the long run you're going to lose or reduce that surplus, how is India going to make that up? Okay, its deficits with East Asia was the reason that you didn't go into the RCEP. You opted out of it. But therefore, if you're not integrating towards Asia, is in the long term an integration towards the West, given the shifts taking place in the world, going to resolve India's problems or not? That is a serious question. So perhaps at an immediate context, you signed a deal with EU because both EU and India are dealing with the US problem also. Okay. And you have signed a deal with the US. It's not a free trade agreement, but it's a deal, a trade deal. where you have had to make certain concessions, surely, compared to what existed before. We'll know only the details when the fine print comes, but this deal is, to my view, something that can resolve an immediate deal with an immediate problem. But in the long run, the question is, does India have a forward path, given that the rupee is not a dominant currency in the world, a forward path where it can live with larger deficits than it already has? If not, where is it going to make it from? That's the question that is going to be faced. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very elaborated. You can close that. Very elaborated. I didn't want to stop you, but because the flow, the discussion was really giving us an insightful to what's really behind the scene and the back door of the deal. But I'll give the Dr. Robinder to start the discussion now.
Thank you so much, Dr. Awad. Thank you so much, Prakashji, and thank you so much, the distinguished thinkers and doers, I think, in this room. Everyone, I think, pursues international affairs with some degree of hobby or at least professional interest. So it's indeed a pleasure. Thank you, sir. I'll try move a little quicker with bullet points. I would much rather have that we do a Q&A, if time permits.
Yes.
Firstly, in a big picture, and then I'll come down to why the suddenness of this deal. In a big picture, what I think the age in which we are living in, it's not a new world order, say. I find it to be a new world matrix under construction. We are living in an era in which, okay, you could say new world order, but rather a new world matrix is being constructed right now. And this era, I would say, started with COVID. When COVID ended, the world came to stop for the first time ever in humanity. The world has stopped. By the time we were coming out of, the world was rebooting from COVID. Russia-Ukraine war hit. By the time it was somewhere, then the Israel-Gaza conflict, and then Mr. Trump came. So there have been these four waves which we could see, which have completely disrupted the order that we have imagined or known. I would rather say, if for some scholars, since the Peace of Westphalia, when the notion of nation states was, brought forth. Anyway, we'll go into that later. So we are living in an era in which all of these things are happening, the questions and the issues that you set out, sir, it's happening in all world capitals. All world leaders are thinking about what to do next. There's a recalculus going on everywhere in the world. So where do we fit in that, and where does this matrix keep evolving? Now, coming to the suddenness of the deal, I think the reason of the deal happening or being announced, I could probably see it censored, maybe many of you, is pure and simple economics. It does not serve us to continue buying Russian oil anymore now. Three reasons. While there were tariffs, we were buying, we stood up, and we were paying 50% tariffs. No, 50% lately. But then what really hurt us, I think, was the sanctions on Lukoil and Rosneft. That anyone buying crude from these two companies, those companies would face sanctions. So be it a public sector or be it a private sector, they cannot afford that. So they have to stop going. And these sanctions against Rosneft and Lukoil came into effect in, I think, November 21. Okay, so that's a blockade. We are facing 50% tariffs. Then, right there on the wall is a 500% tariff bill in the US Congress. Fine, let's continue buying. In a week or 10 days or 2 weeks, Trump and the Congress could fast track that bill, and they have all bipartisan consensus in the Senate and the lower house that any nation who trades or buys oil from Russia will face 500%. So that's out there in front of us. We are facing 50 now. The other now, the economics. Every year, on an average, by buying Russian crude, we were saving, or we are, about $8 to $10 billion. In the 3 years, there is some data which shows that the past 3 years, we saved around $25, $26 billion by buying Russian crude oil. So in a year, we are saving around $10 billion. One. On the other hand, even if we continue with 50% tariffs, the numbers say that theoretically, 1% of tariffs in America leads to a loss of $1 billion exports of India annual. $1 billion of exports of India supposedly supports 100,000 jobs. So if we have 50% tariffs for the entire year, it means we lose $50 billion exports. We have exports of goods around 95 billion, whatever. We come down, we lose $50 billion exports. If not 50, we lose 40. If not 40, we lose 30. And similarly, we lose those jobs. So the trade-off, I think, from a common logical numbers point of view, forget the geopolitics and the context. Do I save the 10 billion here, or do I lose my 40, 30 billion dollar exports to the US? I think that's the baseline decision which had to be made. And therefore, I find it to be a rational decision. But yes, it's the stark reality which is out there. Now, the other things with respect to, Venezuela and all, that is also understandable. We were buying fuel from Venezuela till about or a few years ago, 300,000 barrels a day. And perchance, the type of Russian crude that we buy, the heavy, viscous, sour, which our refineries can process, is the same which Venezuela produces. So right now, we are buying about 1 million barrels a day of Russian oil. We've reduced in the last 2 months. We can keep reducing that. We will reduce. And some of that we can buy from Venezuela. We cannot compensate all of the Russian, closure because Venezuela produces itself only 1 million barrels a day. The infrastructure is busted. So maybe we can buy 300,000 barrels a day. Okay, it's the same quality and our refiners can process it. And in the process to Trump, what it gives, Venezuela had a reserve of about 50 million barrels stored due to the blockade, which they could not export, right? They've agreed that whatever the two traders will sell, part of that money, 40% will go to the Venezuelan government, hard dollars, and the rest will be for the oil companies and all. The first tranche, they've already sold off worth about $500 million. They've already sold, of which $300 million is in a bank in Qatar, by the way. This account is being operated in Qatar. How they do it, we don't know, smart guys. $200 million given to the Venezuelan government. They need dollars, they're given dollars. That's beginning to take. In fact, today, just now, I'm seeing a report in Bloomberg which says Reliance is going to buy 2 million barrels from Venezuela. The trade has already started in that sense, right? So we can take, these 2 million is from the storage tanks, right? But going ahead, if long term, it'd be like 100,000, 200,000 barrels a day we could be buying. So I think it's pragmatic common sense. In this matrix, you got to figure out, okay, do we go with the choice of sticking with 10 billion saving from Russia, or we forego our exports and jobs and all of that with America, geopolitics aside. So that's there. Now coming to the issue of tariffs. Trump loves tariffs. All his life, he's had this peeve that other nations are kind of taking unfair advantage of us. We have low import duties. Other nations have very high import duties. He's been griping about it ever since the 1970s, that others are unfair. In his first term, he could not do what he really wanted to do because his administration was not very absolute, his loyalists. This time they are, so he's going at this time. So the first is that he thinks that it's unfair trade, it should be balanced out. You see, it's unfair. That's his first with regards to tariff. Second, he looks at tariff as something which brings in money to the US Treasury. I mean, ironically, the tariff money is being paid by American importers, right? They're the ones importing and paying the duty, but fair enough. This money into the federal kitty. Before Trump came, as I think we were just discussing, the average American weighted import tariff was around 3%. America imports around $3 trillion worth of goods worldwide. So 3%, 30 trillion, it was getting around $90 billion in the federal treasury. Trump and his team decided that we should go for an average of 20%. So with the 3 trillion import, we would be generating around $600 billion a year. In 10 years, that would mean $6 trillion. How they would allocate, we'll come to that. They know that, prices will go up, inflation will go up. But from this money, he is looking to give some money to the farmers, to satisfy the constituencies which are feeling the pain. So he is looking to use this money that way. He's also looking to use tariffs to promote inward investments. And by the way, he is succeeding in it to some extent or the other. He says, look at a deal with, let's say, EU. The deal is 15% tariff, $1.35 trillion, of which 750 billion to buy energy. How will Europe buy that much energy? We don't know. But $600 investments by European companies in America. Japan, 20% or 15%, whatever tariff, $550 billion. The Japanese have been screaming, crying, petitioning, but wherever somewhere. So Japanese companies to invest around $400, $500 billion. And he's saying in the next 3 years, still I am here. He's saying that it may or may not happen. Similarly, South Korea has been arm twisting them. Come and invest Hyundai for shipbuilding in America. So some of these tariffs are having those impacts. And lastly, the fun thing I think he has discovered the value of tariffs is that he thinks in making peace. He's discovered this suddenly, I think. Okay, in the last 6-9 months, that okay, I can threaten both parties and tariffs would work. So these are the reasons that he loves tariffs. Suddenness we've done, why he loves tariffs. Regarding India, why they have behaved with us this way, I think broadly speaking, they look at India as a lightweight. They look at us as a lightweight, and we should be real with us. We are a 4 trillion odd economy or something. Fair enough, we are growing and will be much heavier in this matrix down the line. We do not have any specific levers like China has. And thirdly, I think the corporate elite of America has little bit kind of downsized India's importance, including in the strategic sense. The paradigm was India as the counter to China. Okay, the geopolitical and the trade. Okay, the trade counter India remains as economy, but from the geopolitical they see, but they don't see India taking up arms and fighting alongside them. And we do not even know even if America is going to fight against China. That's a totally different topic. So they don't see that. They see India as a difficult market. Ease of doing business is honestly not so good if for us also. Okay, our judicial system takes ages, arbitrations and all. So the idea is that, yeah, India is a great market, we'll make a lot of money, but when? They don't see that, many of them. So that's been a few reasons why they've been working with India in the way that they have been with us in this process. Just one other point maybe, and then I think that's the one ones. So, I mean, we can get into all of this discussion. One more thing I would say is that, in the world of today, again, going back to the fact that we are living in a matrix, there used to be, and there is a concept of comprehensive national power, right, in international affairs. In this era, it's no longer about having a comprehensive national power, military, and all of that. Yes, it is that, but it's much more your comprehensive nodal power. Where is your node in this matrix and with whom you are connected for what purposes? So that's a few things. Thank you so much, sirs.
Thank you very much. Very nice, very insightful. Both of you have really highlighted issues and provoking everybody in the audience to speak. I will open the floor for a question and answer session. And please introduce yourself and where you're working for and to whom you are addressing. And make it brief so we can take the maximum questions. Please, yes, please. Wait for the mic, please. You'll take it in a minute.
No, my name is Debujyoti Bhattacharya. I'm an industry professional. Wanted to ask that, recent, victories that India has had in fintechs, example, and data-heavy startups and cloud service providers. Don't you think so? The entire pushback that US has against data localization via these kind of deals and all will actually put us into disadvantage to a certain extent, and especially smaller Indian firms may lose regulatory shelter.
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Actually, in some of these matters, so I'm not very familiar with exactly the area that you're referring to. But in one sense, for example, as far as cloud computing is concerned, there's one sense in which there's been what he was referring to with the loss of interest in India. Because it's not just a question of the difficult market, but also a question of the fact that the nature of the Indian market is such that ultimately when they do their calculation in dollar terms, it doesn't translate into a very important thing. So let's say, for example, when you look at telecom, it's a large market. That's the one product everyone in India has, a mobile phone. But what is the revenue that it generates? It has to be very low tariffs. So the revenue generation capacities are not necessarily always everything. So therefore, and then when you translate that into dollars, which is the way in which they would be calculating, it doesn't add up to very much. So there is from their point of view, some tendency of a loss in that. Now, as far as the regulatory thing is concerned, we'll only know the details when the things come. So, on the one hand, you are dependent. All this startup ecosystem, etc., is dependent on capital flows into India that are coming from also a US dollar-centered kind of financial system. So, you are, and that's an important part of covering your gap. Also, the capital flows coming into India are important part of covering the gap. I'm not sure how much regulatory protection that is there now. Okay. But essentially, if you just look at the conditions, it's not so difficult. Relative competitiveness of India vis-a-vis the US or any of the advanced economies has actually increased over time in almost every area. What is India's problem is that it has relative competitiveness vis-a-vis East Asia has declined. That's been the problem that India. But I don't think that this by itself is going to be a problem. I don't think you do need much protection there because it's the way it's aligned is not based on protection. So, for example, IT services don't rely on protection to be able to grow in India.
A couple of bullet points, and maybe a parallel came to my mind. Why is America so angry with Europe? You know, there used to be movie Albert Pinto ko gussa kyun aata hai? So America ko Europe pe gussa kyun aata hai? I want to relate to that. But the whole thing is that yes, yeah, that will be a challenge. Data localization. We want it from a strategic interest, and I absolutely think India should have. We may have to. We will compromise, adjust, but data localization. I mean, it's becoming critical. So let's see what the deal says. But that also brings into the question, you see the perception of Indian market that it's over-regulated, as we are saying, too many compliances and delays, etc. And this brings me to the parallel of Europe. If you see, I mean, is the West, why is the US so condescending towards Europe now? The Trump and MAGA people. For a couple of reasons. One, they see that Europe is the fountainhead of liberal thought. The Ivy League universities of Europe, you know, they promote liberal thought, human rights, environment, and all of that. And they just hate it. They don't want it, the present American dispensation. Second, they think that Europe is over-regulated. Like the environmental requirements in Europe are huge. American companies don't like it. Okay. Over-regulated otherwise in tech. You see, they got cases and suits for Apple, Google, Facebook, and all of them have gone to Trump and they're trying to figure out something. So these are a few reasons why America is absolutely going adrift. In fact, I would say in Davos, they had a divorce. Okay, let's see what goes on. It's there. So similarly, in India, we will face those issues with the US policymakers, but data localization, I think, is something important to look out.
Thank you. Yes, please. Yeah.
You can sit down. Okay. Myself, SS Dogra. I'm bureau chief for a magazine, Himalaya, Nepal. My question is for both of you, Ravinder sir and Surjit sir. Comparing previous governments, now under the leadership of Honorable Prime Minister Modi ji, how you compare Indo-US relationship?
Well, if you see that there was a long period of time under different administrations where the Indo-US relationship became warmer. Okay, so you had the nuclear deal signed under the UPA. Okay, and you had, of course, and it was thought that under the current government they had a special relationship with Trump. So it was in that sense a bit of a rude shock that India was clubbed with everyone else in the that you didn't really have a more favorable position in this whole battle vis-a-vis the US, because you have to keep in mind that unlike say China or even Europe, okay, India has a surplus with the US, but India doesn't have a surplus in its overall transactions. Okay, that's a very important difference. Okay, but India perhaps thought for some period of time a more special relationship with the US was possible within this context, and under different governments that has gone in that direction. But now it is that special relationship is not necessarily protecting you against consequences of this kind. Okay, so
Thank you, sir. On India-US relations and Modi-ji-Trump-ji relations? Trump-ji, Modi-ji. Sure. I mean, in world affairs, what is paramount, absolute paramount, is your national interest. So, howsoever you define it or you look at it. So, what Trump is doing, he thinks that is the best thing that he has to do for America, to make America great again, to make America golden, and secure America and future of Americans for the next century. That's what he's looking at. Okay. Here, Modi ji is looking the same for India. Right. So these are national interests. Personal relations are definitely absolutely important. They help you, they help you a lot. But the fundamental rock is national interest. Now, in terms of national interest, as I said, the 2008 US-India nuclear deal was a milestone, I would say. I actually worked a lot on it, both in Washington, D.C., India, as public diplomacy kind of things. And it was known as Atoms for Peace and Trust. The deal was sure for energy, nuclear energy, right? And that was a play in 1950s, mein jab Eisenhower and Candu reactors we got. It was known as Atoms for Peace. America, then they had the idea, we'll give you atoms, nuclear energy, but use it for only peaceful purposes. So the 2008 deal, which came to be on, I would say, was a deal on atoms for peace and trust between the US and India, which there has been a deficit always, sanctions, some this and that. So the last many years, since 2008 to 2025 now, we were definitely, and we've gone much deeper, much wider, more trust, but there are still gaps in some high-tech areas and national interest. So that was the trajectory so far. However, I think that now, as all of us saying, we will get back to a trajectory, a very good trajectory. We will do a lot of things together. We do need each other for many, many, many things. And America is not going away. It's the world's largest economy, world's largest market, world's largest investor, technology, whatever it be, right? But the fact is, I think now we will be in a new normal, or rather a new special than before Trump. We had a special relationship with America, okay, by the time Trump came. But the last 1 year, I think, would have been, should have been, must have been a learning or something like that for our strategic thinkers and all of us here, that this is how, is this how can be, is this where America is going? So now I think we're heading into a new normal and a new special.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Sir, my name is Silveri. I'm working as a central desk in charge for one Prime 9 channel operating from Hyderabad. I'm a desk in charge generally. As a common trader or exporter, still there is no clarity of my commodity will be exported to Europe or USA. 7 days back, I am the friend of European Union. Now America also giving the lot of offers. As a common commodity manufacturer or exporter, what will be my future? As well as economical impact on India.
Yeah, my name is Vishal. I am chief editor for Marodhar 24 News from Rajasthan. My question is to Ravinder sir or Vrinda, you keep mentioning about that India enabled India IT, which we've been seeing from Infosys and all. Why we haven't been able to get on our manufacturing capabilities? We're talking about Make in India. Before that, we had something else. We are not exporting any goods just like the way China does. We are talking about a lot of manpower, a lot of brain here, but in the US dollar way and even exports, they don't take us seriously because we don't make any brand from India. We don't export. Even with the EU agreement, their wines would be coming here, but actually what we're gonna sell, maybe some leather goods or something, raw material, but nothing is clear. That's why on the, sorry to say, on the global market, they don't take us seriously. That's why they keep throwing these stones at us whenever they want to, and they use us as an outsourcing machine. Actually, a country which exports from here. Thank you.
Thanks. Probably I'll try. Maybe some ways they both tie in together also. See, none of us knows about the deal, what it would benefit the trader or what would be there. But it seems that exports both to Europe and America should become easier because part of what these deals do is come to standards, compliances, common standards, their standards, what we can, and our standards, what they can, because the non-tariff, so to say, barriers, right? So it will smoothen some of that. And then let's see what tariffs they impose. But I would also like to highlight one clarity we should have. Imports are not bad. Imports are also needed for the domestic or any economy, right? So if let's say you're a manufacturer, you need some components, you should be able to get them at a lower tariff rates. So this notion, if we have that imports are, not good for a nation's economy, I think that's a very misplaced notion, as perhaps any economist would perhaps agree. So the imports will become cheaper for those manufactured goods or whatever goes into the next level of component. So let's wait and see what the deal shows. In agriculture, it seems they've said that they've protected the sector. Maybe they've allowed some, we don't know. But what we do know is that 18% will be our tariffs in the US and our import tariffs will go down. Which sector, where they go, we don't know. So overall, it should definitely be helpful, I think. Will post this thing. Now, sir, Vishal, hi. Thanks. Good to see you. Why not exporting manufactured good? I think a couple of things, but one thing we should kind of forget. We cannot be the factory of the world now. There was a time in history when that was possible, when China got that opportunity. The mass manufacturing styles of the 1990s, the industrial age in some senses, right? The world of today has much changed. If then you had a car manufacturing plant, you needed maybe 1,000, workers in it. Now you need maybe only 100 or even 10. You have dark factories which are manufacturing without any manpower. And America facilitated that a lot. American companies went in, invested in scale, and they had economies of scale. I had friends, who would say to me, one of them was purchasing high up in Walmart, or Walmart only. He said, I'm buying 1 million pair of socks every month from China. Is there any manufacturer in India who can give me that? No. Okay, so that economy of scale we were not able to, and we did not for multiple reasons. And I think now also part of that remains, but I do think our manufacturing is definitely, innovating and trying and being agile. All of that is there. Also, once again, it all partly comes back to ease of doing business. China had advantage that you had to just go to one person, the mayor or the Communist Party boss of that region, and say that, okay, I'm going to put in $50 million for this plant. I need the clearances, whatever land, electricity, water, fire, whatever. All done within a month. In India, for our own, whatever it be, that would take you ages. Right. So that has been, these are some structural factors. Please.
Yeah, as far as the first question is concerned, the idea of a deal would be to remove the uncertainty. But unless you know all the details, you cannot know the uncertainty will remain till the details are known. Once the details are known, at least you know the framework within which it has to happen. The consequences may still be uncertain. As far as the question of manufacturing is concerned, I think it's an important question because The major part of India's problem comes from manufacturing. I could, of course, go on. It's my area of research. So but essentially, the point is that once you have a world opened up, for both things, you can go and sell anywhere. You have to produce in a country in order to sell it, and you can produce anywhere. Okay. Then, in such conditions, the tendency would be to concentrate. Relative positions will determine where it tends to go, and that tended to favor China in this period. So, partly because of the fact that it was located within a region which had already other countries had already experienced significant industrialization before that. The East Asian region could become a region. South Asia could never become a region. The political barriers to South Asia region have proved to be far more formidable to overcome. So East Asia became a region. East Asia had a larger population, a bigger market, better infrastructure, all other conditions. So you have a tendency for that to gravitate towards that. And that's why you see that in India's trade, there is this shift. You actually start importing from there. And your production system becomes extremely dependent on those. Now, what happens with the consequence of this is, of course, that you are not able to generate a surplus in manufacturing trade. In fact, India's manufacturing trade has moved into deficit. In the early 90s, there was a short period in which there was a bit of a surplus. It kind of moves into a deficit. And the fact, if you do not emerge as a significant location, you also do not get the investment which comes to stay produce. And therefore, India becomes more dependent on more volatile flows as opposed to long-term capital flows that come stay for long periods of time. That is correct. That this is, and as I said right at the beginning, India and US, every one of them is in that condition where the significant manufacturing in their economy is sticking, both in production as well as
But in another terms, also, you will maybe India has to improve its own production so they can compete
No,
with the market.
That's what I was trying to say. That India cannot. India is not an advanced economy which has had a history of full-fledged industrialization and then moving towards services. It has not had a significant industrialization. And if you do not produce, if you say growing and incomes are going to grow, and therefore, suppose you assume that demand for manufactured products will grow, if you do not produce sufficient, it is not so easy to purchase manufactured products from the rest of the world in exchange for services, because many services do not have the capacity to trade. 80% of the world's trade is in goods, okay, and largely manufactured products, whereas 60%, 65% of the world's production is of services. Services don't get traded on the same scale. So the possibility of specializing in services and importing manufacturers, that's not a long-term possibility. You need to therefore strengthen your manufacturing.
Okay, we'll take two more questions, please. Yes, please, Ashok.
I'm Ashok B. Sharma, a freelance journalist. Question is, Trump has been insisting that India should not buy Russian oil. I need clarity on this. Whether the India should decrease or stop buying Russian oil. Number two, tariff is all said and done. But the main question remains about these non-tariff barriers and sanitary and phytosanitary measures. Our trade is mostly affected by non-tariff barriers and sanitary and phytosanitary measures. How you are going to deal with this? Tariff is all said.
Rabinder, I'm Neville. Rabinder, you mentioned that it's a learning curve with this new deals that are taking place with. But haven't we learned from history with America? We are clamoring to be a partner, a junior partner with America, who has always backstabbed its alliance partners throughout history. Isn't this? I mean, it's a diplomatic failure. It's a leadership failure for over the years of trying to clamor and be a absolute junior partner or even subservient just to face China, and we've been used by everyone.
Thanks. Maybe first this and then show yours, perhaps, if I can.
Can I supplement one question about you when you were when we are our topic is behind the US not trade deal, and yes, you elaborated the Russian. Now, since Ravinder Bhai, you have written a book on how to decode Trump, the fact remains that everybody also in the world knows that Putin's biggest friend happens to be Trump himself. And suppose the Ukraine war comes to an end, tomorrow, then this entire, fear of 500%, I think 2 or 3, some, mad, Republican senators or representatives have it under no circumstances, whatever exposure I have, it's this area, maybe this is not going to be, accepted or going to be passed by the American Congress. And forget about it. But the point is, once the Ukraine war comes to an end, and Putin proves to be the biggest friend of Donald Trump, how much one can highlight on this Russian fact? The Russian, that means that embargo automatically be minimized. Thank you.
Great. Interesting. Yeah, absolutely. So probably putting it all together. I think partly that's what Indian diplomacy was working towards, hoping and wanting to, that this war should end ASAP. So that if this war would have ended, we would have faced this situation, right? Automatically sanctions on Russia would go, but remember the sanctions on Russia will go step by step, but the oil would have gone. Russia is facing, I think, over 2,000 sanctions, and withdrawing them, cancelling them through whatever orders will take at least another 2 years before Russia is back. Yes, there is every possibility once the war ends, but we do not know when the war ends. It could stretch on and on as it is stretching on, but there are all indications that Russia and America, in fact, Russia is positioning this whole discussion as a as a discussion negotiation between America and Russia, and Ukraine as a secondary thing. If you see in all of them, they're saying we are opening up diplomatic relations, we'll be discussing that. Putin and Russia is projecting it more as a bilateral discussion first between these set of America-India relations. America-Russia relations and investments. And the Russia. Oh yeah, he should be happy. Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And the Russian side is being led by the head of the sovereign wealth fund, Kirill. They've talked about mining rights and also, yeah. So they're looking at that. This whole area is pretty, this. What was the question? I do think it is a big
I
factor.
want a clarity on this. About Russian oil, America is insisting, Donald Trump is insisting that India should decrease or stop buying Russian oil. So what is the clarity? What is the actually fact?
So, actual fact, I mean, I would not know. I'm not a fly on the wall, really, what they decide. But if we look at what is happening, India has started reducing buying Russian oil. Since November was the last month, it was around 2 million barrels a month. In December, it was about 1.2. In January, it's about 1.1. So India is beginning to reduce. And my own sense is that, as I discussed earlier, the economic basis, it does not make any economic rational basis for India to save $10 billion a year from Russia and keep facing $50 billion or $30 billion loss with America. So given the situation, I think it's an economic decision. That's my reading. So we can see, as I said, today Reliance has purchased 2 million barrels of Venezuelan oil. They've signed a contract. Bloomberg is reporting. Okay. So if we read these tea leaves, it means, yes, what Trump has said, we are seeing the numbers are going down, India is reducing, and we are seeing that India is buying at least some Venezuelan oil because they want to quickly monetize that oil. So that's what's happening. It's a trend, I think, that one is talking about with regards to Russia. Yeah. See, on the non-tariff barriers, I would have no clue. I don't think any of us, we would not. Let's see what comes out. But the expectation is that they'll be standardized and non-tariff barriers will be reduced by us and Americans, because the idea is to smoothen the flow and lessen the friction. Once again, we don't know, but there should be some progress there, because phytosanitary and all is required for exports of vegetables and such, should be, but I don't know.
I mean, I don't see on these things any favors being done to India, because these are standards that you set. So you can't say that someone can export rotten food to you, others can. So there's, yeah. No, I'm saying that of course, but they are generic measures. They are not necessarily specifically only against a country. What you're saying is absolutely correct. There are significant non-tariff barriers. Okay, there's also with EU the carbon border adjustment mechanism, which is also coming into force. How that will be dealt with in the India-EU FTA is also not very clear at the moment. So if you look at the narrative of the US, it is like that India is higher tariffs, we have lower tariffs, we are more open than India. But it's not, doesn't always work out like that, because generally non-tariff barriers are much more stringent when India is exporting to the other way around. So it's a lot more even in terms of the degree of protection that is being offered than simply when you can read from the tariff, what are the relative levels of tariffs. As far as the oil question is concerned, see, as far as Russian oil is concerned, if you look at it in the immediate sense, before 22, India was not importing Russian oil. Okay, it's not traditionally been an important source of oil for India. So for them, it might look that at the moment it is something that, but it might not end with Russian oil. There's also the question of Iran. There's also, and there is a difficulty that India is likely to face if it doesn't have freedom, given that it is always going to be a net oil importer and a country with a foreign exchange deficit, if it is not able to have flexibility in terms of where it gets its oil from. When the decision to take Russian oil was concerned, it was also simple economic. It was at that point of time, and it was cheaper because of the sanctions. It was cheaper because of the sanctions. It might not be cheaper if they. Yeah. So of course, I quite agree with you about the question of learning from history, and I was trying to point out that there is you were referring to more the political aspects of the relationship, but the economic situation in which we now find ourselves this point is also the result of a political reading that we can live with this. We can live with this pattern, and it's not going to create a problem for us. So we didn't necessarily act on time to prevent this situation from arising. And now that we are facing, there are immediate constraints. You suddenly can't switch off and move to a different trajectory. But the question will be that if that is the immediate context, if you cannot live with it in the long run, how are you, in your adjustment to the present, going to be able to manage to gradually move away from that particular position of vulnerability. That is also going to be a question that has to be faced. Not just a failure of diplomacy, but it's also a choice of your policies. Okay, that you choose to kind of you think not that your way in which you integrated with the world economy would be suitable for your interests. Okay, and that's happened over a long period of time. But there is a long period of time which has produced a certain condition today. The question about manufacturing that was being, it's not something that is arisen now, and it's not arisen because of Trump. It's a long historical process that has created it. So every time governments have talked about it, that we have a problem on the industrial or the manufacturing front, but we've not been able to seriously address that issue. The reasons are, and that's got to do with also our internal policies. It's not just diplomacy. But the diplomatic failure would be not to recognize that there might be specific vulnerabilities that will arise from this.
Quick question.
So just a small question, just going on the line of the previous question. Now there's another industry called pharmaceutical industry, where India has some major players like Aurobindo Pharma and other players, which are Sun Pharma also is a nifty company basically. Now, sir, with incremental tightening of pharmaceutical IP, basically, don't you think since US is for patent enforcement and it is against compulsory licensing, won't it be that as far as India is concerned, India needs compulsory licensing for public health policy in its generic drug industry, basically? So, don't you think so? Incremental tightening on pharmaceutical IP will hurt the pharma industry? I mean,
See, India's competitive strength has always been in generics. It was related to a particular pattern of patent laws that India had, which allowed that strength to develop. But we, in any case, in 2005, have amended our own patent laws. Now, of course, compulsory licensing is still there, but large part of India's pharmaceutical industry has been one of the most successful in the globalization game amongst the different manufacturing industries. But it too has that particular problem. It is dependent on imports from China of APIs and significantly dependent as an export market. Okay. So the problem here will be as the kind of industry starts moving away, as pharmaceutical things start moving away from the generics that still constitute a large part of what drugs are, which are many of which have also gone off patents. Okay, but as more and more patented drugs start becoming important in the drug basket, in the long run, that might be a problem. But immediately, I don't see that it's changing the condition unless there is some extra measures in relation to IPRs that are going to come as part of this deal. Okay.
Sir, I am Vijay Bhaskar, Supreme Court advocate. My question is, in fact, it is not a question to you, it is my doubt. That Trump is imposing a huge tariff on India. Like, so whether the India is supplying contaminated or substandard products, therefore is imposing that tariff? Because in Venezuela, that Nicolas was kidnapped, Trump is saying you are the main person causing that trafficking. Therefore, I am kidnapping. The reason he has given. Therefore, whether the India is supplying substandard or contaminated, because we are facing a lot of fake products in India. Many cases are registered in India. Therefore, my doubt, that's why I said in the beginning, it is not my question, it's my doubt.
Hi, I'm Ratna Jyoti. I work for S&P Global Platts.
I have one. I mean, I want to know from you, what about your respective takes on weaponization of trade? One, and secondly, whether India's, India clinching deal with EU ultimately influenced Americans to, reduce the tariff. What are the takes on this?
Thank you so much. There are some to which I think I can say clear-cut yes and no. I may be wrong, but I'll say yes and no. Firstly, to your question, did Trump impose the tariffs or doubt because of contaminated products from India? No. So, straight yes and no there. Uh, okay, others a little bit more. The last one. If the EU-India FTA influenced Trump to drop the tariffs, I do not think so. It may have been a contributory factor, but I think the primary trigger for them was that India adjusted to start reducing Russian oil, purchasing Russian oil, and at the same time, it gave him a quick entry to generate foreign exchange dollars for the Venezuelan government. I think that was the trigger for the oil trade, the oil trade. And for us, it was more the economics, overall economics, what is good, bad, ugly for us as a nation, right? Out there. Tightening of intellectual property, will it not hurt? See, the point is that we have to improve our own IP also and IP protection also. That is the challenge that we are facing. The quality of our own products in world markets perhaps is not, or could be much better perhaps. We need IP protection within our own country itself. And sir, you were talking the doubts of contamination. What are we talking globally? Look out here within our country, we have adulterated milk we are selling, adulterated medicine we are selling, pharmaceuticals. So how and where are we ourselves setting our own standards and progressing ourselves as a nation? Forget the world. We have to do many things within our own country also. So the FTAs with Europe will plug us into a richer market where we'll have to, upskill our own, abilities. That's one way, obviously, out there. Lessons learned to the point of US policy, I think, yes, and US has been doing, There is a lot of nasty things in the world, but it's a mix. And I do not believe, or I rather not look at many conspiracy theories that this also by US, this also by US, but US plays its own game. There is a Persian saying, trust in God, but tie your camel in the night. Okay, one. And secondly, when life gives you a lemon, make lemonade. This is the reality we face in the world. We have to engage with the US or whatsoever be. They are still big money bags, investors. We have a huge diaspora in the United States, which plays the role of some kind of a bridge. In fact, our entire IT industry, if not entire, a good portion of it, I was myself in the IT industry also, right? Benefited from that bridge between Silicon Valley, let's say, and Bangalore. Okay, so there's a huge market, whatsoever it be, we are, look at our trade numbers, so that's there, but trust in God, tie your camel in night. Lastly, I think, again, weaponization of trade, yes, absolutely, that's what they're doing. This is a new world matrix in which nations are virtually heading back to the jungle. That's my thesis, but not thesis, my doubt. And I'll add one more quick thing with respect to understanding America and Trump. Two things. These elites, be it the Musks and Trumps of the world, they believe themselves to be race horses. Race horses are a superior breed. Okay. And what we are seeing in the world today happening is a race horses club being formed, the strong, powerful, etc. On election night, when Trump was delivering his victory speech, he looked at Musk, and Musk had his chota bacha with him. He said, Elon, you have a racehorse there. Trump says, my uncle teaches at MIT, he's a professor, he's very intelligent. My children are so beautiful, so smart, they're racehorses. Those are the underlying things that we go to track also, by the way. So, but that's the world we are in.
I think no, I'm sorry. We need to close up the discussion. You can have a separate view now because we crossed the time limit. we can't because we have people also watching. I make a small observation before I give the mic to Narayanan give address the vote of thanks. I think we are living in an immoral world, where the illogically is illogic, where there is no morality at any stage. We have seen that countries have been looted. We justify not buying oil from another legitimate country. Well, we justify buying stolen oil from another country. That's how it is. I mean, this become the art of the hours. We have Epstein file, which is also thrown on the table. We are worried that could be another war because there's a blackmailing list on that. So there is at the end of the day, I believe, the tariff which is imposed by a personalized foreign policy of who's called Mr. Trump. He has personalized it in such a manner that he is the unique president of the United States, where he is delivering everything in his personal. It's a Trump era. That's what it is. So I think tariff is being used as a tool for achieving political realignment. And there where India and the rest of the world were refitting in the new world order, I don't know where. And 2 points I wanted to raise. One is that we are hosting a book release by one of our friend journalists, eminent journalists in cricket, and on the 11th it will be K.R. Nair. He will be the eminent journalist in sport, and we will be facilitating him here. So most welcome to come on the 11th. On the 12th of next week, also we'll be hosting a memorial meeting for our beloved founding member, Mark Toley, Sir Mark Toley. And this hall will be known as the Sir William Mark Toley's Hall, so auditorium. So you're most welcome to join in both days. Thank you.
This is the vote of thanks. Thank you so much for coming. And this discussion can go on for days. Actually, we have kind of passed in 1990s where there was a general agreement on tariff and trade. We survived that and we benefited out of that. Now we are in an era of a specific agreement on tariff and trade. I'm sure India will survive this also and we will be benefiting also. Thank you so much.
Token gift from our clubs as welcome to the club. Yes, please. Yes, we'll have a book discussion here. Okay, that's for sure. Thank you. Oh, it's for you. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We will have your book discussion next time. Thank you. Join us for refreshment, please. Thank you.